that's the value equation. And the brands that are great at demand gen are just great at the value equation, which happens in your product, your offering, and your messaging. Like it's this whole thing. It's not just ads. It's not just the messaging.
Just talking about e-commerce in general now, for people that are considering like how we sell to people nowadays, and you mention multiple touch points, what's like a typical journey that you think in 2024 people would take to buy a product, particularly if they're looking to buy a high ticket item?
Yeah, I think particularly if they're trying to buy a high ticket item, I usually see, this is just typical of what I see when I get on a consulting call, a marketing consulting call with a brand, and I look at the mix of where their traffic is coming from, where they're spending money. There's almost always some channel that's leading discovery, and that is usually Meta still. So it's usually Facebook and Instagram still, and it's usually ads, right? Sometimes it's TikTok, and specifically there's been some brands in the past year or so built on TikTok organic, people really kind of taking off on there with TikTok Shop. Sometimes it's also like podcasts or podcast sponsorships or creator integrations. Specifically, I'm seeing YouTube creator integrations work really well right now. So usually there's some sort of like main discovery demand generation channel, and then there's sort of a web of demand capture, you might say. So you're getting all the eyeballs you can with some top of funnel channel, and then there's Google, and there's email, there's usually Microsoft, which is Bing, and text message, and all those things that sort of like all of that traffic that comes in, you just don't want to let any of it leak out. And those are usually cheaper and they're higher return. So that's like what's very typical. I would say there's sort of another path, especially for high ticket, where a brand might purely be a demand capture brand. A good example of this in high ticket is an ice tub brand or a cold plunge brand that isn't plunge. So Plunge really sort of like came in and created all this demand for cold plunging or taking ice baths, whatever you want to call it. Athletes have been doing it for like 10 years, but they made it cool because they got Andrew Huberman to talk about it, right? So they've run Facebook ads, they've run podcast ads, they've done all of that. And that's created like this massive trend and wave. And then there are some brands that really just like are an alternative, and they just kind of run Google ads, and they go on Amazon and sometimes run Amazon ads, and they just take a piece of whatever of the pie, however big the pie is, they just take a piece of it, and they don't necessarily go out and try and create demand for themselves. The upside there is, in some cases, it's easier. I think there's only maybe 2 or 3 or 4 brands at a time that can really do that, depending on how big the market is and how much it's growing. The upside is, it's a little bit easier for those few that kind of like get in at the right time and just sort of ride the wave that's being created by something else. The downside is you have no control over your own destiny. If that trend goes away, you're not creating trend at all. You're not generating demand at all. You can't grow, at what you don't have really a growth. So I would say that that's like a lot of what I see now is there's brands that purely live at the bottom of funnel and just capture demand of like people who are already interested in grills or ice tubs or, smokers or something like that. And then there's brands that have some form of like top of funnel, we're going out and getting eyeballs, and then they have a whole web. There's upsides and downsides to both. And I know your question was, what's a typical customer journey? The answer is, for high ticket, I wouldn't say that there's anything typical about it, right? Like it's, for example, you might see somebody click on your Google ads like 30 times in the same day. You might see somebody click on your Facebook ads 3 times, go back, click again, go back, click again, and then go back and like click another retargeting ad later, click your email, wait 2 weeks, then click 3 Google ads. Like it's just it's all over the place, especially with high ticket, I would say. Customer behavior, when you break it down to a person by person, which you can do in Triple Whale, you can just pull up a customer and look at their journey. When you break it down to person by person, it gets a little wonky. But yeah, I mean, super common, I think, first touch, second touch channels would be like a Meta first touch with a second touch on either Google or email, and a last touch on either Google or email.
Amazing. But it's important to have more than just one prong attack. There's got to be some sort of discovery and then something to mop up the, capturing the demand, either from another brand that's created that demand, maybe the brand that you've actually partnered with, the suppliers that you sell, or another brand in your industry that's actually a competitor, you can mop up their demand, or even just retargeting people that have been to your site. So it's a mix of both.
For sure. And there's even like a pathway. I know that people become like authorized resellers on Amazon. You know what I mean? So I have a friend who has like a pretty large Amazon business by just being one of the 5 or 10 authorized resellers for different brands, right? So for like Darn Tough Socks, he's one of the 10 authorized resellers on Amazon, or, you know, it could be Hoka Shoes or whatever. Those are lower ticket things, but Camp Chef, you're one of the 5 authorized resellers on Amazon. So that's a whole path too. And I actually think one of the things that I've noticed at Triple Whale that I find really interesting is that I've always like been more of a Facebook advertiser, TikTok, like demand generation advertiser. And I would say that probably still 70% of all the spend that we see, 65 to 75% of all the spend that we see is on Meta, depending on the time period that you're looking at. But I can see brands that are the same kind of brand, appeal to the same demographic, they're competitors of each other, but they just have completely different ecosystems when it comes to how they spend their money. One might be like really heavy Google, really heavy Amazon, one might be really heavy Meta. And what I kind of think is that it's like they're like animals, right? So animals live in different ecosystems. You got lions that live in Africa and they're an apex predator there. And then you have Bengal tigers that live in India and they're an apex predator there. And in their own right, they're both apex predators. They just live in completely different ecosystems. So they never really, you know, like they're able to both exist in the same world. I think that's true of brands as well. Like there are some that live in this demand gen space and demand generation space on Meta or on TikTok, or, you know, running creator integrations or any channel like that. And they just live in a completely different environment than the brands that are capturing a lot of the demand that exists in the market.
Be the winner in each different environment. So the way that we set up our e-commerce brands, to give you some more context about the type of marketing we do, is we'll predominantly have Google ads running for our high ticket items as our demand generation, or we'll try and expand the market, because we won't necessarily just run for search terms of like the brand names. We'll also run for like the products themselves or the problem that your market might be having to drive sales. And then we mop up with Meta retargeting as well as Google Display Network retargeting ads. And my question back to you after the initial points you made was, if somebody decided that they wanted to really double down on being the apex predator in demand generation for their industry, but they're fairly new to the industry and they haven't got a lot of experience, I imagine that's more of a harder path to take rather than just mopping up demand. Kind of, how would you advise them to do that? Would you say like TikTok is the way to go, or learn social media, or like how could you improve their skills at generating demand?
Yeah, and this is why this has always attracted me. I think there's more skill in generating demand, and I would actually even argue that like the like layout, like what you just said, the formula you just said, it's still mostly a demand capture formula, unless you're literally going after like pain point keywords where you're maybe going after like how to sleep, if you're selling cold plunges or whatever, how to sleep better at night, and then you're trying to write an article that attaches that to a cold plunge. That might be kind of demand generation. But like if you're running PMAX campaigns or shop campaigns, that's still demand capture. You know what I mean? People are a certain way down the funnel before that's working. So like truly making demand generation work, if you look at some of the examples, I think it's not about a platform so much as being a skilled marketer generally. So what I mean by that is like there's a formula for creating an offer that like Alex Hormozy says that I think actually works pretty well. And it's if you think of it's like a, you know, dream outcome times perceived likelihood of achieving the dream outcome, and that's on top of like a division bar, right? And then on the bottom is like the time, how long it's going to take, time delay, and effort and sacrifice. So like price and how hard it's going to be, that's in the effort and sacrifice section. And time delay, how long it's going to take. So using a simple example of weight loss, which most of your clients, I mean, some of your clients might be selling exercise equipment or something, or not clients. Keep saying clients. Some of your listeners might be selling exercise equipment. You know, if I buy, like, what's my dream outcome here? If I buy this, you know, this at-home like workout thing, it's I want to be shredded. I want to look good, right? What's my perceived like that? Drew, that's a big dream outcome. I might want to be healthier. Maybe I'm not. You know, maybe I have some health issues. I want to, you know, do better with the ladies, whatever it is, right? That's a big dream outcome. So that's great. You've nailed that. But what's my perceived likelihood of success? Probably pretty low, honestly, because There's a reason I don't look like that in the first place. And if I had like a bunch of willpower, I would already look how I want to look, right? So I already don't have a lot of willpower, and I already don't really believe that an at-home workout thing will make it so that I look good, right? Time delay is going to take a long time because I'm going to have to do it for I'm going to have to work out for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and then effort and sacrifice. Well, not only do I have to pay you for this at-home workout thing, but I also have to use it every day, right? So there's a lot of effort and there's a lot of sacrifice. So what can you sell that for? A few $100s, maybe $1,000? I don't know. If you go after a different market, of people who know that they're fit and know that they're active and just want convenience, then you're changing the dream outcome to convenience, which is not as big of a dream outcome, but you're making all of the other things better, right? So I think a lot of demand generation is just finding the right combination of formula and messaging that is going to work for your product, right? So weight loss, if you take the example of an exercise equipment thing that I just said, I kind of laid out that formula. What about like a gastric bypass? So just have my stomach stable. Well, I'm going to get the dream outcome. It's going to happen. I'm 100% sure it's going to happen. It's going to happen tomorrow. So all of it is really high, which is why they charge a lot of money for it, because the only real barrier is effort and sacrifice, and the only sacrifice I have to make is money and a little bit of and some recovery time from surgery, right? So that's why that's a lot of money. So that's the value equation. And the brands that are great at demand gen are just great at the value equation, which happens in your product, your offering, and your messaging. Like it's this whole thing. It's not just ads. It's not just the messaging. So if you get really good at that, then I don't know that it matters that much what channel you do it through, if that makes sense, right? It could be through TikTok. It could be through Meta ads. I think Meta ads is usually the simplest place to start. It's still probably the best way to run paid ads and give yourself the best likelihood of success in the shortest period of time, unless you're really good at TikTok organic. If your product is the kind of product that can go viral on TikTok organically, there's a couple examples of this right now, or there kind of always are. A couple examples of products that are just going viral on TikTok organically. If it's that kind of thing, then maybe TikTok could work for you. But otherwise, I think, and I would focus on organic content then. But otherwise, I think if you're going to start with paid ads and you're going to try and do demand generation, Meta is probably the easiest channel. But the more important thing is that you nail the messaging and you nail that offer equation, which is why I like demand generation, because there's more human touch and more kind of like figuring it out. The better you get at that, the more of an advantage you have. There's a skill set,
Yeah, exactly. And it's more of an abundance that you can create in your market. If you can be the one that creates the demand, it's that control that you mentioned earlier. You're not relying on there being demand already. So, that you can write your own paycheck because you can build the demand that's there.